You are now watching Believe. Do you believe?
Joining me now is Mark Zinno, host of A to Z with Mark Zinno on the Locked On Sports Atlanta podcast feed, and also the host of the Hazard Ground podcast, as well as being a national sports betting analyst. Mark, man, it's quite a lot you got going on. How are you? How you doing? And thank you so much for finding the time to join me today.
I'm searching for sleep and more hours in the day. That's about it. But staying busy, brother. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here with you, man.
Yeah, we're doing a little bit of a home and home this
Yeah.
week. I hopped
I like
on your
it.
podcast Tuesday, and you're here to talk about the Falcons on this podcast. And I was kind of looking through some of the news that's occurred since we last spoke, and a bunch of stuff came out today. So we're gonna kind of start right off the top with kind of the biggest news, which is I think that Deion Jones expected to miss the entirety of the offseason after having shoulder surgery. Arthur Smith announced that today at the press conference. So we talked a lot on Tuesday about kind of was Deion Jones's future in Atlanta coming to an end sooner rather than later. Does this change any of your opinion on everything we've heard about Deion Jones recently?
I mean, it makes him untradeable. Like that's the problem. Like even if someone was going to offer you a 7th-round draft pick and be willing to take his contract, which I don't think
Yeah.
anybody's is willing to do, he's untradeable at this point. So it's either cut him or pay him to not play. I mean, that's essentially what it boils down to. And my guess is here as we sit here on May 26th, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 6 days from now, he'll be gone. I don't think there's any reason to believe that he's any part of this. If you look at what they've put in that linebacker room, among just all the, even if you don't know all the names, just know that they've brought in 5 or 6 different linebackers. They drafted Troy Anderson, and this is all been losing Foye Oluokun as well. So they've had to put bodies there. But between what Deion's skill set is, he's not really a fit for the 3-4 defense that Dean Pease runs. And clearly the tape showed last year that this was not a guy who really put forth the best effort. So for somebody who was fighting for a job or at least trying to keep a job, Deion didn't do a very good job. I guess he figured I got my money, I got paid, I got X number of million guaranteed, and I'll let the chips fall they may. Well, the chips are going to be falling come 6 days from now.
Yeah, and I mean, usually something like this would make me ask the question, okay, well, was injury a factor for him last season, like in his play? Because he noticeably played his worst season. I mean, I think it's fair to say that was his worst season of football last year. And so, as the NBA playoffs are happening, it seems like anytime somebody has a bad series, we hear that they were injured
We're
in the
injured,
middle
yeah.
of the
Yeah.
playoffs. I wonder, I would ask like, okay, well, was Deion Jones injured last season? Is that why his performance slipped? But now I'm mainly asking, do we think he waited kind of deeper into the offseason to get this shoulder surgery? Or do we think it happened kind of at the start and we just haven't heard anything about that? Because that would make me really wonder what, like the timing of it
Yeah.
all. Why are
The
we
timing,
just now hearing about it?
it's definitely curious because again, with post June 1st looming, and the
Exactly.
idea that he could be traded or even cut and then be a street free agent for anybody to pick him up and sign by announcing this injury now, again, it makes everybody's going to go, okay, well, I'll wait till October. There's no reason for us to pick him up now. Let me see what my situation is in October. I could be 6-2. I could be 2-6. I mean, so there's a lot of reasons to not announce this now, unless he felt like, if he was really trying to be, and nefarious isn't really the right word, Will, but if he was just sort of being sneaky and planning around the fact that he thought the Falcons might get rid of him, knowing that he was injured, the Falcons may opt for an injury settlement more than anything else, or look to go down that road. I don't know. I don't know all the particulars of it, but the timing is definitively weird. And he may be able to keep some more of his money because he is injured as opposed to not injured. Theoretically, the Falcons could put him on IR and leave him there and never play him. The money still counts against the cap, but the money was going to count against the cap anyway, right? Like even if you cut him after June 1st, you were only saving, what was the number? Off the top of your head? I can't remember. I want to say it's like 5 or 6 million.
I want to say it was less than that. Like
Okay.
I don't think it was very much, but it was something, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So either way, I mean, it could just kind of be a way. You could argue that it was a way to stick it back to them. If they were going to cut me, fine. I'll be injured, and one way or another, you guys are going to have to pay me or get rid of me. And who knows what'll happen here at this point? The timing definitely curious, and like I said, I think he's on borrowed time anyway.
Yeah, and there's been so many weird things with players who were once keystone parts of this organization. It's mind boggling that everything is kind of all coming to an end for so many different players in ways that you would never have foreseen two,
Yeah.
3 years ago.
I mean, the problem for me is, again, and I hate to beat this drum because I'm annoying when I get on a thing and I don't let it go, but this was stuff that all should have happened when Arthur Smith first got here. They really should have just cleaned house all from then and started over, man. Like, I get it's not that simple, and I know I'm simplifying it by saying it, but it's
Hmm.
like, the moves that were all made were like obvious, man. You knew you had to get rid of Julio's contract. You knew you had to get rid of Matt's contract. You knew Deion Jones was just an albatross and he wasn't playing that well to the contract that he signed. And you knew the players that you could keep. And you did keep them. Luckily, you still have Jake here. You still have Grady here. Obviously the young players that they drafted are still here, but you kind of figured who was primed to go and who isn't. And I just bothers me that they waited an extra year to do all this stuff when it could have been done before.
Yeah, and I mean, I definitely think that there is a way to look at it, black and white game theory type of way of
Sure.
saying if you're not going to win it all, because for years, honestly, inside the building, to Tabeek behind closed doors, I was like, if you're not going to win the Super Bowl this year, then why win any more games? You have kind of an inherent obligation to future success to try to get as much valuable capital in the short term to build that up, and by winning games, you're robbing yourself of that draft capital. But I think as I can come around and be persuaded to the importance of maybe a 7-10 season last year where you surprised some people, you did win some close games, because the mentality I think in that locker room was so shot after the 2020 season where things went wrong in every possible way. And guys just looked frankly
Yeah.
spooked coming out of halftime. I mean, it wasn't even like the game's tight in the fourth quarter. There just wasn't, I think, a belief that they could win really any type of game that wasn't just a blowout in their favor. And so I think that that's maybe why they wanted to at least instill some type of culture. But yeah, it feels like they've now set this thing back by at least a year by, maybe not going that course from the get go. So yeah, I mean, Deion Jones, you hate to see it kind of come to an end here, potentially like it is, but that looks like the writing's on the wall. Another notable player who apparently is rehabbing, Keith Smith, and that will lead us into the running back room, because the running back room now all of a sudden is kind of this week a major story. Keith Smith, obviously, presumably the starting fullback, but they signed today former Titans running back Jeremy McNichols. Also announced that Avery Williams, who was drafted as a defensive back, is going to be kind of moved over to running back for at least training camp. And I wrote down everybody in the running back room for Atlanta right now: Cordero Patterson, Damian Williams, Keith Smith, Tyler Algier, Jeremy McNichols, Quadri Allison, Caleb Huntley, Avery Williams. That is about as loaded a position group as you could get going into training camp.
Well, depends on your definition of loaded. I mean, it's bodies, right?
True. True. It says
It's
crowded, I guess I should
yes.
say.
I was going to say crowded is probably a better word. I mean, look, you and I talked about this. My bet is right now, as we sit here at the end of May, Tyler Algier is the week one starting running back. When they announce the starting lineups, it'll be Tyler Algier being the week one. He's going to have every opportunity. If he doesn't get the starting job, it's because he didn't win it.
And do you
Flat
mean
out,
that
he's
in
going.
more like a traditional running back role?
Yes. I mean,
Okay.
I think, again, they are going to try to get Cordero out to wide receiver a little bit more this year, as they should, or at least get him in the slot, at least try to create a little bit of mismatches for him that way.
Hmm.
Because, I think Cordero Patterson last year was used in the running back room as a necessity. If you really felt like Cordero Patterson was a guy you were going to trust, let's just say on the low side with 10 to 12 carries a game, you wouldn't have 6 other guys in the room. You just
True.
wouldn't,
True.
right? Like there's no reason to. Like
Right.
think about it. Go back to what even the Falcons had with Dan Quinn. After Tevin Coleman and Devontae
Yeah.
Freeman, there was
Ito
only like one or
Smith.
two other guys.
Yep.
You didn't need anybody else.
Yep.
You had at the time they had a fullback in Patrick DeMarco, but you get the point. Like running back rooms are 4 deep. That's it. So when you have 7 guys sitting there, it's because Cordero needs to know what to do at running back, because he'll be gimmicky. And I don't say that as a slight on his talent, but they will use him in specific ways. But clearly, again, he's going to be going back out to the wide receiver position more than anything, because if there's anybody who can stretch the field on this team speed-wise, it's him. So
Hmm.
I think that's the direction that they go. And Tyler Algier is going to have every opportunity to be the number one back on this team and win the job. I know those other guys that are there. I'm not even sure what Kadri Allison is doing here, to be perfectly honest. And I say that just because it's like you know exactly what you have. And if you
Hmm.
didn't play him last year, why all of a sudden he's going to play this year over 6 other guys in a running back room? Like that's weird to me. Just from a standpoint of connecting the dots, it doesn't seem to make a ton of sense. Um, but we'll see. I think that this running back room, uh, more than anything, they are just hoping to find somebody who can give them short bursts, right? But if you're looking for a bell cow, the only guy I would say gets 15 to 18 carries on the regular right now is Tyler Algier.
Yeah.
Algier.
And I mean that makes sense. I weirdly, I think that you could talk me into, because he's got some of the size there. If they felt maybe Keith Smith is gonna miss all of training camp and gonna miss the preseason, maybe you plug in one of the bigger backs like a Quadri Allison as a little bit of a pseudo fullback for those purposes before the
Mhm.
season starts. I mean, maybe, because I do think, because it is so crowded, that something like that is probably at play. The Avery Williams part of it is really interesting, because I think he's got a really good chance to still make the roster as your return guy, as your kind of special teams key player back there to take kickoffs and punts, because he did that last year. And it's not like he did a bad job or a bad enough job to cost him that role. And so usually when you pencil in a special team spot for one of these key guys, it's going to come from the position group that they're a part of. And yeah, cornerback is really crowded. Maybe they felt like they needed their cornerbacks more than they needed some of their running backs. To your point, how many running
Yeah.
backs do we need? Maybe that's a spot where your fourth running back is your returner. I mean, what do you think about that?
Well, okay. So it's always interesting when you see guys switch positions, right? Like when you're the Patriots and you do something like this, it's Bill Belichick being a genius.
Yeah.
When you're the Ravens or the Steelers or somebody or the Packers and you do something like this, it's the coach being a genius. When you're a team that has this bad of a roster and you don't know anybody on the roster, you're doing this because you're the Texas State Armadillos and you're just trying to find guys who can play like
Yeah.
anywhere. You know, like it's just like it doesn't
Our
matter.
best 11.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think I don't want to slight Arthur Smith for this decision, but it's not often you see guys. It's not like going from second to shortstop in baseball.
Right.
Like this is dynamically different to go from defense to offense. It's dynamically different to go from corner to running back. Like if you said corner to wide receiver, okay, I can get
Hmm.
it. Schemes are similar, right? You're understanding what the other guy is doing, so you know sort of basic concepts and everything. But this is completely different. The kid used to be a running back in high school. Yeah, Heinz Ward used to be a quarterback in high school too, and you know what? He never did in the NFL, play quarterback. So it's one of those weird things to me that um, speaks to the idea. And I'll give Arthur Smith. I'll lean on credit here that he's willing to try anything at this point to get results. If he thinks that there's a way to do something that's better, he doesn't have to be conventional. He doesn't have to get stuck in conventional thinking. No, we can't do it that way because my dad would have never done it that way, even though his dad ran FedEx and didn't do anything with football. But you get the point. So, it's just like one of those things where he's not going to be stuck into some sort of box or some sort of cookie cutter way of doing things. He can go out on his own and figure out the ways he's going to do it.
Yeah, and I do really like the thought process behind. Again, it could make sense in a certain through a certain type of lens. He does have a running back past. He went to Boise State kind of as a running back. That's how he got his foot in the door, and then they transitioned him over to the defensive side of the ball. But he's obviously got skills as a return man, and you could see those being translatable to a running back situation. I still kind of think that he's pretty much nothing more than just your returner, and so I think your point is very smart about how many running backs do you need, especially because we know that Arthur Smith values versatility and especially personnel versatility. I think that their running backs and wide receivers, there's going to be kind of a
Yeah.
blurred line between how they use all of those guys anyway. So yeah, maybe they really, think that their cornerback group is a little bit deeper than we may be thinking.
Yeah, and that I would too. I would also say, just remember, I mean, you're walking in a camp and OTAs count to with 90 bodies, right? Like at the end of
Yeah,
the day, they're not keeping 6 running backs on the roster. Like
no.
that's just not good roster management. 4, yes. Maybe 5 if he does play a whole ton of special teams. And I could see the Falcons doing 5 with Cordero Patterson being considered one of the running backs, right? Because again, I think he'll play more wide receiver this year than he will anything else. But I'd be shocked if there's more than 4 other ones other than Patterson on the roster.
Could you imagine what we would all be saying if the Falcons had not had that flurry of signing wide receivers and then they just had 8 running backs on the roster going into training camp? It was like
Oh
Drake
God.
London, OZ, and Auden Tate, and then 8 running backs. It would be the way like when we were talking about the Ravens 2 or 3 off seasons ago and they just kept
Mhm.
signing tight ends.
Yeah.
What was that, the Raven? Which team was that? It was
Yeah,
like,
no,
yeah,
because they drafted Hayden Hurst, they had Mark Andrews, they had
yeah.
Nick Boyle, they just kept stockpiling them
Yeah,
all
it's
over the
like,
place.
do they know something that everybody else doesn't? No, they didn't. They just, wanted a lot of tight ends.
Yeah,
Um,
but I tell you what, I think Arthur Smith looks at it and says this. 2 things. The old competition adage that every coach has, right? The more bodies I
mhm.
put in there, the more competitive everybody's going to be, the best I'm going to see of everybody because they are going to have limited reps. So they're going to give their absolute best every single time they're out on the field. Like that's the old, mentality of coaching just to create more competition.
Yep.
So I think that's a big part of it. But 2, the other part is that, from a talent standpoint, all these guys are kind of generally the same. And you
Yeah.
need to see who deserves to be there and who doesn't. Again, I think a lot of these guys are going to end up being all these signings that they did. Bye bye. Come training camp when they have to start cutting guys down. Bye bye. Like it's you're not going to keep all. And don't be surprised to see if for whatever reason, who's the guy they got from the Raiders? Why is he Reggie Williams? Is his name?
Damian Williams.
Damian Williams. Sorry.
Yep.
Don't be surprised to see if he were to get cut, it wouldn't shock me. Now you'd go,
Exactly.
you traded away an asset for him, you gave away next to nothing for him, but that's neither here nor there. The point is that if he doesn't play well, he's not going to be here. There's no locks on this roster right now, with the exception of 3, 4 guys. I mean, other than that, everybody else is fighting for a job.
Yeah, it's Younghoe Koo and then everybody else.
You did
No,
that
I
on
mean,
purpose.
yeah, I think that it's going to be a horse race, right? And you've got horses of all the same caliber, and it's really just going to be all right. Who's able to come first, second, third, fourth, kind of over the course of the next several months. And I don't think we're going to see a lot of Cordero Patterson in preseason. This, after all the moves today, that was pretty much made clear. And if there is a position that you want to maybe get guys and I always hate this term because it's very insensitive, but like burn them and churn them in training camp,
Yeah.
like running back is where you would do it. You get fresh legs out there every 5 plays or so. It helps the rest of your team because you got guys running fast. So there is a lot of benefit into heading into training camp and OTAs with a lot of guys at kind of that position in particular. But I want to kind of pivot away from the news, get into a couple of broader topics. And I was going back and listening to your podcast, and great job, by the way. Love the whole overall vibe.
Appreciate it.
And one of the things that you said on kind of the Falcons could make Vegas look bad podcast was, if the Falcons do manage to get kind of 6-7 wins, because like they did last year, they just beat up on the bad teams. They didn't win against the good teams. There's more good teams, I think, on the schedule this year, at least on paper, than there were last year. And so therefore your wins they become harder to find. Vegas, is not very favorable for Atlanta. What are they? 4.5, 5.5, 4.5. So yeah, so people are not high on Atlanta. Your point was if the Falcons find a way 6-7 wins, that looks really favorably upon Arthur Smith and Terry Fontenot, even though the team has not really sniffed the playoffs yet under their regime. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that? And then the flip side of where could this get precarious for Arthur and Terry?
Well, this is not a talented roster. We know that, right? Save AJ Terrell, Grady Jarrett, Kyle Pitts, Jake Matthews, Chris Lindstrom. There's like no talent anywhere. It's like devoid of legitimate talent. And after that, it's a whole bunch of unproven guys, including the rookies who may turn into something we don't know, but we're just assuming at this point they're unproven. So of a 53-man roster, you have 4 known commodities that are actually worth anything that could probably start somewhere else on an NFL roster. After that, it's up for grabs, everybody. If you can take that and get to 6 wins, that's 1 win less than they had with Matt Ryan under center last year. With this quarterback, this wide receiver room, the running backs we just went over, the defense we just went over, and the myriad of linebackers that nobody knows the name of, that is a hell of a coaching job by Arthur Smith. That's about scheme. That's about taking less talented players and making them successful and putting them in positions to succeed. You know who does that really well? some guy named Bill Belichick. In fact, he's made a 25-year coaching career and 7 Super Bowls off of it. Does Julian Edelman look like a specimen that scares the hell out of anybody on a football field? No.
Chris Hogan.
I mean, you could just name that. Why do you think Belichick was still taking guys like not Keanu Neal, Harry
Neil Harry.
Neil Harry, whatever his name is. I knew there was a K in there somewhere. He's drafting guys like that because he always believes that he can make them better, or he can create mismatches for guys like that, and he can find value in players other guys can't. That's really what's sitting in front of Arthur Smith and Terry Fontenot right now. And, Fontenot's the guy who's orchestrating a lot of these 7 running back rooms, 9 wide receiver rooms right now, just collecting players and bodies and talent, saying, okay, Art, go find me the 5 or 6 most talented wide receivers. Go find me the 3 or 4 most talented running backs. That's on you. I'm giving you the best that I can get that's available right now. You got to coach them up. And I've said this repeatedly, and you and I talked about this on A to Z about Kyle Pitts. It's inexcusable for him not to get 120 targets. It's just flat out inexcusable. He's the best mismatch on the field. And I don't believe Arthur Smith won't do it. I believe Arthur Smith absolutely will scheme him the ball, but it doesn't matter who the quarterback is, because throwing the ball in his direction is the best game plan you can have, period. It is the number one mismatch you will have on the offensive side of the ball. And so exploit it to the nth degree. And somehow if you can turn this into 6 wins, 1 win less than you had last year with Matt Ryan, that is a phenomenal coaching job and a hell of a job by Terry Fontenot, just finding guys who can make things competitive. Because you're not winning a Super Bowl this year. Hell, you're probably not even making the playoffs. But show me you can at least be competitive. That's really what you're looking for. And I keep going back to the comparison with the Cincinnati Bengals when they drafted Joe Burrow. They had no offensive line. The best receiver they had was not Tyler Boyd. Okay, because T. Higgins was a rookie, and A.J. Green was coming off an entire missed season the year before with a foot injury. So those were his wide receivers. Joe Mixon was a guy at that point in time. He wasn't the Joe Mixon we know now. And that was it. And they had some players on defense. And yet every game that Joe Burrow played his rookie year, they were competitive. They fought. You could see that they were a different team with him under center. And that's all you're asking for at this point. Just be competitive. I always say this, how you win never matters. How you lose always matters, right? You can win a game on a bad referee call. No one cares. You can win a game on a blocked punt that goes out of bounds for a safety. No one cares. You could win a game on a ball being batted off the opponent's helmet and landing in his hands. Like, it doesn't matter. No one cares when you win. How you lose always matters. If you keep getting your doors blown off and you're losing games 37-6 and you're getting embarrassed on a routine basis, that's a problem. That speaks to lack of preparation, because nobody in this league, Will, is that far apart from anybody else. You can make an argument that every NFL team is only 2 or 3 players away from being a playoff team. So the talent gap is so small in this league that nobody should be getting blown out on the regular. And if you are, it speaks as much to lack of talent as it does to coaching and preparation. And that's where Arthur Smith can get in trouble. He's not expected to win a lot of games. Nobody's expecting him to. Hell, Vegas has even set their power rankings, and they're not like, the stupid power rankings that sports reporters and guys like in our industry put together. They're actual legitimate power rankings, and they have the Falcons ranked as the worst team in the NFL. That a baseline team that is middle of the road and 0 on neutral ground, the Falcons would be a 5.5-point underdog, the largest in the NFL. Okay, that's how little Vegas thinks of what the Falcons roster is. And a lot of that's not them guessing. That's based off of like years and years of number and data and talent based and stats rather based on the players that they have. So they're telling you that the Falcons aren't good. Now, I'm somebody who's already looking to fade that, right? Because I believe the Falcons are going to be a little bit better than what people think. And as long as Arthur Smith can keep them competitive in games, even if it's only for 3 quarters, right? That's a good sign. Like, if I'm in a 20-17 or like a, let's even just flip it around and pretend the offense can score, like a 28-24 kind of game as we get to the fourth quarter. And then the final score ends up 42-24 because they scored 14 points in the fourth quarter and you didn't score anything. I'm okay with that. Like, it's going to look like a blowout on paper, but when you watch the game, hey, man, they're hanging in for 3 quarters. They got to figure out the last 15 minutes and how they get there, and 1 or 2 guys could make that difference. That's something you can actually sink your teeth into. But that's why I say how you lose always matters. If they're in games, then that's important, and I think that's a great thing for Arthur Smith. And I could be foolishly optimistic, and I know I'm rambling on here, but I feel like there's reason to believe that Arthur Smith is the right coach to do this. For as much as everybody thinks I'm the negative guy in this town, I really genuinely believe he's a really smart coach. And he's a little bit ahead of the curve on a lot of things. I think that he really can do this and get this team to 6 wins.
I agree with you. I mean, I was a little bit more pessimistic last year than I think most people were, and I'm a little bit more optimistic this year than I think most people were, or are, because I agree with you. I mean, I think he showed me a lot last year with his use of formation and
Yep.
personnel groupings, because and the same holds true this year. Like that team, even with the players that they did have that they don't have now, was still not as good as a lot of the teams they were playing.
Yeah.
And so you have to find these small little advantages. And I think that Arthur Smith is a type of coach who really focuses on these small little
Mhm.
details that add up and then win you football games because of the cumulative effect of those details.
Here's the real challenge. The offensive line. Like honestly, that's the one thing that can blow this whole thing up. If his offense doesn't have any time to be able to like just run a play, that's going to be problematic. And there's not much you can fix about that. I suppose he could scheme his way around it, but I would expect, given the receivers and people that they've compiled, this is a whole lot of 3-step drop and throw the ball to the biggest target you can find that's only 4 to 6 yards away. Like they're going to dink and dunk the hell out of everybody. And then hopefully when everybody collapses, they'll take a shot down the field with somebody like Cordero Patterson or whatever. But I don't know that they're going to have all that much more time than other than for a 3 or 5-step drop and release. Everything's going to be timing routes with this team and ways to get guys open that way. And I think Arthur Smith's smart enough to realize that.
See, I kind of think we're going to see much more actual play action bootlegs with
Okay.
players like Marcus Mariota and Ritter, and they're going
No,
to
I get
move the
it.
pocket, and
I get it.
they're going to try to
100%.
help. Yeah, so that's how
That
I
just
think
creates more time for you to get rid of the football. The
it
one thing
does.
I don't like about the rollout is it cuts off half the field, right? And Mariota
Hmm.
probably needs more than half the field to work with.
It's true, but maybe that also plays into the fact that they went and grabbed some gigantic receivers. So even if the field's cut in half, you can throw it vertically.
Right.
Sky's not.
Right.
Um, what I'm worried because as I looked at the schedule and we kind of right when it came out looked through it, I think I found 6 wins. So right there, that kind of falls in, but there was one thing that I've heard a lot of people, and even hearing you list some of the potential wins on the schedule. In my mind, I was waiting for you to maybe bring this up, and you never did. So I'm going to bring it up. The easiest part of their stretch is week 8 through week 13, right? It's
Mhm.
it's the Panthers at home, Chargers. It's iffy, but then you're on the road, Carolina at home for Chicago, at Washington, home for the Steelers. Those are most of your winnable games in a row right there.
Yep.
But they come after a brutal 7-game start and
Yes.
before your week 14 bye. And I really just worry that their easiest stretch is going to be completely kind of fumbled away because of injuries, just because of the fatigue, the cumulative kind of wear of the season once it hits in there. And then frankly, that game in Washington scares the crap out of me because of how bad that field can be, and because you're going to get guys whose bodies have just been on full go for 12, 13 weeks at that point. I mean, do you think there's anything there? Do you think those are games they should still be expected to win?
Okay. I didn't bring it up in my Falcons can make Vegas look bad show, but I did bring this stretch up the day after the schedule was released, but for a completely different reason. And here is the reason why this stretch could be profitable for the Falcons and they can win some games. When the schedule first came out, and again, I don't do the predicting wins thing. I think it's stupid. I think it's
Hmm.
a waste of time. I have no idea what the roster is going to look like at week 11,
Yeah.
when week 1,
And
let
I
alone week.
generally try not to either.
Yeah.
This is
So
more I look at it 4 games and I go, I think they can
right.
win one game here,
Right. You break it down. But I look at like, if they have back-to-back road games, the level of defenses they play, the level of quarterback they play, things of that nature, what are
Right.
tough stretches, what look like easy stretches. And the first thing I look for in a stretch is, believe it or not, when can I get Desmond Ritter into the starting lineup for a permanent basis? And the two
Hmm.
natural reactions were after the Thursday night game or after the bye week, because you get a couple extra days to prepare or you get a whole week to prepare. Well, the Thursday night game is week 10 and the bye week is week 14. And that's just too late in the season
Yeah.
to really see if you have anything. The best and most opportune time to start and insert Desmond Ritter into the starting lineup is week 8 against the Panthers. The previous week before, you're playing the Cincinnati Bengals. So it's not like it's a long travel flight back, right? An hour and a half flight and you're back home. But I say that because one, The Panthers don't have a very good defense. 2, you're home. 3, the other caveat to this is that you get to play the Panthers 10 days later, and you'll actually get a chance to measure what
Yep.
he learned in a 10-game span from playing an opponent the first time to playing an opponent the second time. And I know the Chargers are the tough team in the middle there, but they're home for back-to-back games, and his first road game is against a team he's already seen 2 weeks ago. That is the most opportune time to get Desmond Ridder in there if you're at a spot where after 7 games, you're 1-7, you're 2-6, whatever. I'm sorry, 2-5, and
Mhm.
things are bad. That's the insert spot, if you ask me. I know it's on a regular week, but Arthur Smith and Terry Fontenot have to be looking in the back of their mind and a long-term plan and going, if we need to make a change, given how brutal the first 7 games of the schedule are, and the Seahawks may be the only win that we have, well, at least when we come home for week 8 against the Panthers, as Devin Ridder is starting, and I have 4 home games in a 6-week span, um, I'll at least get people to show up to the stadium because they want to see the kid play in possibly winnable games. That's honestly the
Yeah.
best way to do it. Yes, I agree 100% on that stretch. And they probably could look if they split with the Panthers and Saints. Okay, they're getting to 5 wins. I think that there are 3 of them. They're likely going to beat somebody they're not supposed to because it
I
happens every year in the
completely agree.
NFL.
Yep.
So there's one of those in there. Give me that 3. And then if you could find something else between the Bears, between, the Steelers, whoever else
Yeah.
is out there that they could trip up along the way somewhere, but they have to split with the Saints and the Panthers. I think that's the real rub of the whole thing. And the fact of the matter is that you'll know kind of by week 10 if they're going to do that one way or another, because they've already played the Saints once and then they get the Panthers in 2 times in a 3-week span. So, but that's that stretch that you look at right there. If guys are groggy and guys don't feel good, insert the young quarterback and see if they'll
Yeah.
play a little bit harder for him.
Inject a little bit of new life.
Yep.
Totally makes sense. And I think the smartest point that you just made is that kind of doubling up Carolina in 10
Uh-huh.
days, because I remember asking Dirk Cutter the exact same thing about Caleb McGarry when they played the Saints, I think twice in 10
Twice in 3
days. It
weeks.
was
Yeah.
the exact same kind of deal, because it was like, all right, you just saw him go up against, yeah, I'm totally blanking
Cam Jordan
on
and everybody
Cam
else.
Jordan. Yeah,
Yeah.
Cam Jordan and whoever, and then you get to see him make the adjustments. 2 weeks later, like that's something that really coaches think about, because you've got direct comparable tape that's not that far off, and you can see how did this player make adjustments, how did he adjust to their adjustments. You really do get a whole deep dive, especially at the quarterback position, when games are as close as they are. So what about the draft, Mark? Because it seems like the draft was, in a lot of ways, now in hindsight, more about what the team should be and will be in future years than addressing anything that we saw last year. Is
Right.
that kind of the sense that you got from it?
I mean, the taking of the wide receiver to me says what they are trying to build, I think, philosophically. I didn't agree with it. I still don't agree with it. From the standpoint of balance is your best friend in the NFL, and I still would have rather had the high level pass rusher or the defensive player, because at some point in time you've got to fix this defense. Like you've got to address it to a point where it is sustainable.
Hmm.
And it's easier to find talent offensively, I think, than it is defensively, right? We just talked a little bit about that. You
I
get a
think I
good
agree with that.
offensive
Yep.
line, there's a lot of running backs out there that can run through big holes. If you get the right blocking, there's a lot of wide receivers you can scheme open against other guys. So, and a lot of that is also dependent on the quarterback. I mean, Taylor Gabriel had one great year. It was when Matt Ryan was throwing the ball all over the place and winning the MVP. You never saw Taylor Gabriel do anything again. Part of
Right.
that is scheme, right? So, uh, but on defense, you just need athletes, man. You need players.
Yeah.
And I thought in the long term, they needed somebody who could help be a cornerstone piece of this defense. And at the time, again, we didn't have Grady re-signed. So,
Hmm.
you get him back, and Grady's obviously going to be here probably for the better part of the rest of his career. If for whatever reason they decide to trade him or something else happens down the road, that's fine. But so I didn't love the wide receiver pick. I really would have been happy with anything else, to be perfectly honest with you. But again, Arthur Smith is in love with a certain kind of offense, and he's going to run it his way. So I understand why he did that. You have 2 very big receivers or pass catchers in Kyle Pitts and in Drake London. I will say this much though about the draft. I don't want to hear anybody tell me about their numbers shouldn't be respectable because of who the quarterback is. Malarkey, bullcrap,
Yeah,
turds, whatever you want to say, whatever bad word you want to use, because guess what? You just drafted those guys 2 years in a row, knowing that within a 2 year span, Matt Ryan wasn't going to be your quarterback anymore. Those guys were going to be here, and Matt Ryan wasn't going to be throwing them football. You knew that when you drafted them both. So you better have had the foresight to understand that it doesn't matter. These are guys who it doesn't matter who throws the ball; they're good
right.
enough to catch it. That's
Yes.
that's what's gonna. I will not give Kyle Pitts a pass. I will not give Drake London a pass, and I will not give Arthur Smith a pass. And again, like I said, it's about targets. I get that they might not catch it, and I get that Marcus Mariota couldn't hit the broadside of a barn with certain throws. That's fine. But the target requisition share better be there for both of them because that's on Arthur Smith. Those plays better be schemed directly for those guys. That's coaching 101, and he's derelict in his duty if he doesn't.
Yeah, get the balls in the hands of your best guys, and that's no longer your quarterback.
Yep.
And frankly, I was getting tired, and I think a lot of people were getting tired of the whole, well, teams are taking Julio away, or they're doubling Julio, or whatever, or Calvin, or insert whatever number one receiver was ever in there for any game. But it was like, well, teams are trying to dictate the ball to go here. It's like, yeah, but teams are trying to do that with the number one receiver on any team.
Right.
Devontae Adams doesn't have an issue getting all those balls. Like,
Oh,
all these players that you see, Keenan Allen,
Jamar Chase,
whoever,
Justin Jefferson, they still get all
right,
their balls.
they're dudes. Get the balls in their hand. Like, teams are trying to take away your best players, but you get them the ball anyway because they're your best players. And I mean, that makes perfect sense, and I completely agree. I think the defensive side, and I was right there with you. I wanted Jordan Davis, candidly. I know a lot of people said
Mhm.
that was high at 8, but to me, the key difference between offense and defense is there is no type of quarterback position on defense, and there's not one player who inherently is kind of either elevating or holding the rest of the guys back. It really is about like all 11 working together doing their role. So you do need more good players, I think, on defense than on offense, because one great player at the right position can overcome a lot of other stuff.
Yeah,
To
and
me,
I would.
Jordan Davis would have filled that need because he would have been one guy that I think freed up a lot of the other 10. So I'm
I,
right there with you, but yeah,
unfortunately, when we review drafts and look back on them, they're always look through the prism of who was left on the board that you passed over. Good, bad,
right.
or indifferent people. And again, I've done this with Vic Beasley. Like, don't sit here and tell me Vic Beasley was a bad draft pick. Okay, he was the best pass rusher available on the board at the time. They desperately needed one, and that's revisionist history to say that the only other argument was that they could have taken Todd Gurley because Devontae Freeman at the time wasn't really what we saw in a back-to-back
Right.
1,000-yard back. You know what I'm saying? So there was a need for a running back there. But other than that, it's revisionist history to say anything else. When it comes to Drake London, it'll be about Jermaine Johnson. It'll be about all the other defensive players that were left behind him. And for Arnold Ebiketie, it'll be about Nakobe Dean, right? It'll be about him.
Hmm.
What kind of career he has. If he's a stud that you let go for whatever reason when you chose Arnold Ebiketie. And look, if Ebiketie works out, I think everything sort of goes away from that standpoint, even if you miss on London because you got the pass rusher you so desperately needed. But still, that's the prism that we always judge these drafts through, right, wrong, or indifferent. It's just kind of how it goes.
All right, last one before I let you get out of here, Mark. But you mentioned Drake London. You mentioned the kind of the tall receivers. Kyle Pitts, obviously 6'6". Drake London, kind of 6'4". Auden Tate, right up there. Brian Edwards, tall. Marquez Valdez-Scantling, tall. Like, these guys, all up there. What do you think that's about? Do you really truly think that Arthur Smith just like loves tall wide receivers, that they are what makes his offense run? Or do you think this is something a little bit different? Because I think when you look at teams, they're always trying to get advantages, right? And speed is something teams really prioritize. I think size and strength are what some teams prioritize. Like, Tennessee wants just like big, physical, strong dudes. They want to run you over and maul you. I I would get it if the Falcons kind of view size and length as maybe their market inefficiency that they could go out and acquire, and maybe that's one of those small details or small advantages and footholds that they think the rest of the NFL maybe is not caught onto yet. And if you look at advantages that receivers have, speed, route running ability, hands, all of that stuff, I don't think size is at a premium when you're paying for players in free agency. So in that way, the Falcons were probably targeting one of the more valuable in terms of just price tag advantages that a receiver could have.
Yeah.
What do you make about the Falcons just having a bunch of really tall dudes at wide receiver?
They want to play basketball on a football field. I mean, honestly, that's what it is. If they can outsize everybody and catch radius, right? Like that's the other term, catch radius. If they
Yeah.
all have a great catch radius, then you make Marcus Mariota's job a lot easier. And I think that's what more of this is about. I know Arthur Smith has always had a penchant for big-bodied wide receivers, C. A.J. Brown and Corey Davis, right? Like, I mean, those are the two
Hmm.
guys that they put out there. They were two huge dudes, not the fastest guys on the field. AJ Brown was pretty fast,
Yeah.
but nonetheless, they didn't have to be because they were going to be complete size mismatches for most guys. Was that a reflection of the fact that Ryan Tannehill isn't all that accurate? Maybe. I mean, but I think when you have it goes back to that. Let me use like a military mindset here. It's just kind of all in how you approach it, right? If they're big and you're small, well, you're not tiny. You're quicker. You're more agile. You have more room to move, right?
Hmm.
If they're heavier and you're lighter, they're slower. You're faster, right? Like I mean, it's just kind of the way you phrase it and pitch it. That well, if we're taller than everybody, then we're going to be able to outjump everybody, and we're going to have mismatches everywhere on the field, and that's what we're going to hope for. So if they want to play jump ball for 4 quarters, that's fine and good until somebody figures out a way to start scheming these guys. I mean, look, at a minimum, I would say if the Falcons aren't drawing more pass interference penalties than every other, defensive pass interference penalties, then I'm not sure why you got these big bodies, right? Because that's what happens when you have big bodied guys. They start
Yeah.
getting pulled on and tugged on because the
Hmm.
smaller guy is just looking for any sort of way to grab something
And
that
there's
he can
more of
get an
them.
advantage. Yep. I mean, there's more to grab too. So exactly the point. So they may just be playing jump ball and hoping for a lot of penalties and a lot of fouls, if you will, with the free throws to follow.
Yeah, they're gonna go foul hunting early.
Mhm.
Get them to foul out. No, I mean I think it's like they're gonna try to play like big ball, right? NBA teams are going small ball. The Falcons are gonna say, all right, well, you're gonna need the size and the length to match up with us. And a lot of defenses, even though that's becoming a little bit more in vogue with players like Isaiah Simmons, Kyle Hamilton, those types of guys,
Yeah,
defenses aren't filled with those types of players yet.
right. And so the other part of it too is that, as you said before, because size isn't necessarily a commodity that is priced heavily. When you don't have
Hmm.
a lot of room against the cap, it's easier to find, right? Like
Yep.
speed costs you money. Like Tyreek Hill
Yeah.
costs money. DK Metcalf is going to cost money. Fast dudes cost money because they're fast, because I
Yeah.
can't recreate that somewhere else. Right? I can scheme guys open. I can do a lot of different things, but I can't make anybody faster. Either they're fast or they're not. And when it comes to size, because it's not valued as much as you said, it's cheaper to find in the bargain basket. But now Arthur Smith goes, well, I'm just going to have the guy be taller than you are, and I'm going to throw it up above your
Yeah.
head. It's to me, it's just purely about the only advantage we can get for the price that we could afford was size.
Yeah, it's like what collector's set can we complete for the cheapest?
Right.
And
Exactly.
that's kind of what they did. Awesome, man. Well, I really appreciate taking the time to join me. Is there anything you want to let everybody know that you've got cooking before we get out of here?
No, just give me a follow on social media, both Twitter, Instagram, at Mark Zinno, MarkZinno. Check out the Hazard Ground podcast. It's my military related podcast, Tales of Combat and Survival. Subscribe, rate, and review. Certainly, we got a huge audience. We've got over 4 million downloads, 270 some odd episodes. If you're into like long car rides and you need something to listen to, they're great stories. They're absolutely stories that'll get you hooked. So, Hazard Ground podcast. Go to the website, hazardground.com as well.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much again for taking the time to jump on.
You got it, Will. Anytime, brother.